Welcome to The Healing Life. I'm Amanda. This podcast is for people committed to healing, not as a finish line, but as a way of living. Every episode, we talk honestly about what it actually looks like to keep choosing healing as life unfolds. When things get better, when they get harder, and when another layer shows up. Let's get into it. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1, and a conversation with Enneagram expert and author Liz Orr. You might know Liz from her Instagram account, Rude Ass Enneagram, or her book, The Unfiltered Enneagram, A Witty and Wise Guide to Self-Compassion. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you all, and this is an episode that I'm actually going to have my family sit down and listen to together so that we can explore ways to better know and support each other. This conversation has already positively impacted my relationship with myself, as well as my relationship with my husband, and it's also been useful in navigating professional relationships. Liz and I are local to each other, so we actually got to sit together in my home and record our conversation, and I hope it feels like you're sitting right there with us. Well, hi, Liz, and thank you so much for being here on The Healing Life. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. I've been looking forward to this so much. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I have to say that normally I try to come into conversations with guests with a lot of research and knowledge and understanding about their topic. But I also don't know anything about your topic. And I feel like it's one of those things that people either really know it or they don't. So I decided to be one of the people who really doesn't know it today. Perfect. To kind of help guide questions for listeners who might be in the same
That
boat.
Is a perfect approach, and I will catch you up to speed by the end of our conversation.
This is very exciting. All right, so let's start with my most basic question. What the fuck is Enneagram?
What the fuck the Enneagram is? In really brief, it's a tool. It is a framework we can use. It gives us a language to strengthen our muscles of self-awareness and self-compassion, and then compassion for other people, because we start to understand that not all of us, in fact, none of us, are coming at our world from the same perspective. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to be learned from another perspective. So it's a really cool tool. It gets used in things like therapy, in coaching, in spiritual direction. I mean, it's like a big buzz topic in the corporate world now for team building. It has a lot of application. And, it's like any tool. It's helpful. There are many other tools that are helpful as well, but I happen to love the Enneagram.
And I'm wondering, just listening to you talk about that, I mean, it sounds like it would be useful for conflict resolution.
Absolutely, yes.
For self-exploration.
Completely.
All of these things.
Yes.
And we love that here at The Healing Life. So I'm wondering if you can, well, I have so many questions, but let's start with, can we talk a little bit about the types?
Yes.
And then I want to circle back to what you said about self-compassion, because that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Enneagram, for listeners who maybe aren't as familiar or maybe have a friend who's absolutely fanatic about it, but which tends to be the case, it is a system made up of 9 different types, 9 different archetypes of people, of personality. And the distinction between types is your motivation. So 2 different types, let's say a type 6 and a type 8, can be demonstrating the same behavior, but it's not the behavior that distinguishes them. It's why they're doing what they're doing. And I like to explain our type as our survival strategy. It's how we perceive the world, but then how we respond to it and try to get our needs met in it and try to just get through.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
It's very helpful.
So trauma survivors particularly probably love this work?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
In fact, a couple of years ago on the Enneagram corner of the internet, people were like, your Enneagram type is a trauma response. And I wouldn't go quite that far, but our Enneagram type interacts with every part of us, including our history of big and little t trauma. And depending upon what you've survived in your life, that protective casing that our type provides is going to be thicker or thinner and more malleable.
So can your type change as you heal?
It cannot.
Okay, that's helpful.
But you can become less subject to it. You have more choice and more freedom away from it. It has less of a grip on you.
So is it kind of a double-edged sword then? Like there are strengths to each type and then like areas of growth for each type?
Completely. It's a full spectrum sort of system. And I would say like nothing within our types are fully good or fully bad. It just kind of, it's about balance. It's about kind of finding that middle ground and giving ourselves the compassion for, okay, in every moment, is my normal defense program appropriate or not? Can I actually relax here and let myself become a little bit more receptive and a little bit more open rather than kind of shutting down immediately? So learning the Enneagram, learning how to observe ourselves is a really powerful way to give ourselves more freedom and more choice out of being so defensive.
I can see how this approach would really appeal to certain therapeutic philosophies because there is that like observation and coaching of self and like parts and family systems.
Exactly. I was going to say internal family systems and the Enneagram are very good friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there are 9 of them. And I think the reason I've never gotten into this as much as you'd think I would, being like a hyper type A sort of person, I'm very intimidated by how many there are. And then like the brief introduction I got to this years ago is like there are levels or like subtypes. So you can have like a kind of complex,
completely.
I'm going to say diagnosis. But
like, yes. Yeah. Yep.
And so that's just been like more than my brain had space to absorb. So when I met you and found out that this was your area of expertise, I was like, someone can make this make sense.
I can try. It can be complex. Very early on in my Enneagram education, I was taught, so it's a system of 9, but you can break everything down into groupings of 3, which makes it a lot more digestible. But even with those subtypes, which is the combination of our dominant type and then what's known as our instinctual drive, that can get complex, but that is really more helpful. That can be really a helpful lens when you're looking at conflict, interpersonal conflict. And it also helps us understand why 2 people of the same type might look drastically different and might be sort of focusing on different areas of survival. But really like, if all you walk away with today is sort of a loose grasp on the types, you're doing great.
Okay. All right. Should we try loose
Let's
grasp?
try.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm happy to announce that Liz has agreed to do a supplemental episode where we're going to do a slightly deeper dive into these types.
Yes.
So if this goes fast, it's okay.
Yes.
I'm going to release a supplemental episode and you can nerd out with us there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Appendix forthcoming. So in that vein of breaking everything down into chunks of 3, before the Enneagram was ever a system of 9 different types, it was developed as a system of 3 different centers of intelligence. So many, many years ago, in the early part of the 20th century, there was this philosopher, spiritually curious cat named George Gurdjieff, and he was interested in pursuing enlightenment. And so he traveled with yogis and with monks and with a group of desert ascetics called fakirs. And he pursued their path towards enlightenment, each of their sort of 3 distinctive paths. The conclusion he drew, in great humility, was that he was successful in achieving enlightenment through these 3 paths.
May we all.
Well, and to his credit, he said, well, if a joker like me could have walked these paths, probably everybody can. But he also observed they're very distinct. They're all, the fakirs were much more focused on attaining enlightenment through the control of their body, through their sort of somatic experience. Whereas the monks their path was much more characterized by relational dynamics, by their emotions, by attuning to one another and to their environment. And then the yogis, their path, still quite distinct, was much more about developing the observing mind. It was a much more intellectual process. And so what Gurdjieff, the conclusion he drew was, we all have these distinctive forms of intelligence. We all have a body-based intelligence, when the hair on the back of your neck stands up or you get goosebumps. We all have an emotional level of intelligence, some more so than others, but that ability to attune to other people and connect with other people. And then we all have an intellectual center of intelligence, something that observes and researches and absorbs and then generates something new.
So at this point, do people usually have an idea which of those three they fall into?
This is an excellent starting point. Yes.
Okay, I'm definitely a yogi.
Okay. So head center, fabulous. Well, that's the one I'll get to last, so that'll be a fun reveal. His first observation was, okay, all people have all three forms of this intelligence, but we tend to lean on one more than the other. The other observation he walked away with was, in order to pursue enlightenment, according to these three communities, you have to pull all the way out of your life. You can't have a family. You can't have a job. You can't have a partnership. You need to retreat from the world and totally encase yourself in these communities, and that's that. And he was like, that's not practical for most people. And so he developed what he called the fourth way, which was this practice of learning to become in tune and aware of these three intelligences in any given moment, these three centers in every moment. So you're not just leaning on the one that you're comfortable with, but you can tap into the other two. And that was the practice towards enlightenment. So from that foundation, Oscar Ichazo and Claudio Naranjo, these two teachers in the 60s and 70s who were also super into psychedelic drugs, then built on that the 9 different types. And so in our body center of intelligence, we have types 8, 9, and 1. And the body center types, again, as you would imagine, very in tune with their body. They have really strong instincts. They're very aware of their boundaries. And when those boundaries tend to be crossed, they go, I'm going to cross yours right back. They tend to experience a lot of anger. They express it differently, the 8, 9, and 1. But anger is the sun around which they orbit. And they're really concerned with their autonomy and their agency.
I feel like I know people
in
my
do.
Life, like very close to me. Okay, this is going to be interesting and helpful, certainly. I think.
Oh, yeah. It's an amazing way to understand the people in our lives better.
Okay.
So your type 8, all 3 of these types are our specialists in control. So when things are not going their way, they're going to try to control. Whether they're going to try to control you or the environment or themselves, that's their kind of survival strategy.
Okay.
So the 8 is often referred to as the challenger or the boss. That is my home type. I'm a type 8. Big, bold energy, very strong, very protective at their best. They can make some of the best cheerleaders. They can also be some of the biggest nightmares to deal with because for them, conflict is intimacy building. So they like to stir the pot a little.
Yeah. Okay, my whole life is starting to make sense right now. I'm so glad you're here. This is the best.
Yes. So they are the type who believes like when the gloves are off, I know who you are. And you don't need to agree with me. I want to rumble and I want to know what you really think.
And that means I'm in it with you.
Exactly. So these are our type 8s. Our type 8s really struggle with vulnerability. That's where it really is difficult. They are the biggest and spikiest type on the Enneagram. They are also the most tender, squishy, soft marshmallows. But it's very hard to get them to let you see that part of them because they believe their vulnerability and sensitivity is a liability.
Liz, I think you're going to change my whole life today. I hope the listeners feel the same way. All right, cool. What's next?
Okay, so next we have the peacemaker, type 9. Type 9, I would contend, the most well-liked type on the Enneagram, also the most stubborn, but they are very diplomatic about it. They're very distinct. They're still in that anger gut center, but they are a much quieter brand of control. They're a little bit of a velvet glove situation. Well-liked because they are kind of the human version of a chill pill. They bring the temperature down. They help us ground ourselves. When you bring a problem to a 9, all they are going to do is hold miles and miles in space for you to be seen and heard. They're not going to insert their agenda. They are just going to make you feel important and make you feel understood and listen to you. Where they suffer is that they are afraid that they're not important enough to take up space in their own relationships. So They tend to do a lot of merging and a lot of yielding and a lot of, it's okay, it's fine, it's all right. And they numb out to their anger. Because if they're in that gut center, they've got a lot of intensity, but if they were to reckon with it, they'd have to do something about it. And that might rock the boat. That might piss some people off.
And we can't have that.
We cannot have that.
Okay.
Yes. Now, this is also a place where it's this type and type 2, which we'll touch on in a minute, tend to be the type that women and people who are socialized as women, when they first engage with the Enneagram, they're like, oh, that's me. Because a lot of women have been socialized to be peacemakers.
We're nurturing. We're the people who notice all of that. Yeah.
And the type 2 is the giver. And we are, again, socialized to be selfless and giving. And so it's just, I like to just note that, which is not to say that there aren't plenty of women who are 9s and 2s. But a lot of men will not necessarily look at the 9 and the 2 because it sort of aligns with our culturally held constructs of women, femininity, whatever, what have you. So I just like to sort of issue that little check engine light on those types because I think it's important to acknowledge that our understandings of gender and race and identity, just all of it, can complicate the process of figuring out our type.
That's fascinating. And I love that you called it like the check engine light too, because I have found that permission really helps me in my world and in my work. In my work with people, sometimes we do need permission to go to those places, especially that socially we're told not to.
Right.
So I love that you name that and put that out there for folks.
Of course. So that's our type 9s. One other note about the 9s, they are not as comfortable with conflict as our 8s are. And you will know a 9 is angry with you when you haven't seen them for 6 months. They just kind of check out and disengage. And their anger will come out 6 years later, sloppy and sideways, over like you buying chunky peanut butter rather than smooth peanut butter. It's going to come out over the thing they're not actually angry about, but that's what feels more safe to be angry about.
Accessible in the moment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Rounding out our gut center, we have type 1s who prefer to be referred to as the reformer, but are sometimes perhaps more accurately known as the perfectionist. You know these types. Highly principled, highly responsible. Their energy and their actions align with their values. And I like to say that they are the stubborn optimists of the Enneagram. They know we can do better. Why the fuck we're not pulling our weight and trying? They don't know, but they know we can do better. They very naturally walk into the room and can see what is wrong and what needs correcting and how they can improve the space. And that control, when they start to feel like perhaps people are thinking that they are not as good people as they would like to be known as, they start to try to kind of hold the standard that everybody needs to reach to, but it's an impossible standard. They also have a unique relationship with anger. They're in a bit of a double bind because they'll look around the world and they'll get really self-righteously pissed off because what the hell is going on? Shit is so unfair. But anger, the expression of it, can be destructive. It can be irrational. It can make things worse. And they do not want to do that in an already messy, already broken environment. And so they just swallow it. They wrestle it down and they swallow it. And you just see how tightly their jaw is clenched. So they have a lot of anger they feel like they can't express. They also really struggle with forgiving themselves, which then makes it difficult to forgive other people. So that's a real point of suffering for the type 1s.
That's interesting because pieces of that really resonate with me too. So now I'm curious to see if I circle back to that one.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I will say, for listeners who are, again, hearing this for the first time, you might see pieces of yourself across multiple types. And that's a very natural thing. And that speaks to the beauty of the Enneagram because it sort of casts a light on how we're actually quite similar, even though there are distinctions, and how we can connect to each different type and find empathy for them because we're like, oh yeah, that's my bullshit too.
Yeah. I love the connection building framework for that.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to conflict and problem solving with this. So yeah.
So the next center of intelligence is our heart center of intelligence, our emotional center. That's made up of types 2, 3, and 4. And the way I like to describe them is like they have a magnetic heart that is drawn out of them. So the 2's heart is drawn towards the needs in other people. The 3's heart is drawn towards the value that other people bring. And the 4's heart is drawn towards depth and beauty and mystery and meaning making. And so they're really attuned to their relationships. Their relationships become this mirror for them of their deservingness of love. There's a real question of identity in the heart center. Who am I? And is that person deserving of love? And their relationships become the barometer for that, the barometer of whether or not I am deserving of love and who I even am. And so we have type 2, again, that type where gender construct can kind of get conflated. But 2 is known as the giver or the nurturer, the real sweetie peeties of the Enneagram. Their gift is that they can just make us feel really well loved. They just like know what is missing within us, what we are longing for, what we don't have, and they can meet that need really generously and without condition. However, they suffer under the perspective that the world doesn't have enough love, and particularly does not have enough love for them, so they have to earn it. They have to earn it by making up that deficit of love for everybody. And God forbid they burden anyone with their needs. Right? Nope. Can't do that.
No, we cannot.
Right. God forbid they say no to someone. So they really struggle with boundaries. They really struggle with expressing and advocating for their needs. They really struggle with even expressing negative emotions. They're very sweet. They're very kind of poetic about their more loving, generous feelings, but to express anger feels really, really scary to them because that might disconnect the relationship.
And might they also find it very offensive if someone who is more confident expressing those feelings
yes,
did so, even in a way that person felt was careful and thoughtful?
Yes.
Okay.
And even if that person were like, no, I'm good, I don't need your help, that feels like rejection to the 2 often. That feels like, because that is their way of earning love, is being dependable and taking care of your needs. So to say, no, I don't need it, is to say, no, I don't need you.
Ouch.
Yes. Devastating. Devastating. Okay. Then we have the 3. 3 is often referred to as the performer or the achiever, sometimes the chameleon. On paper, they sound terrible. They sound like the sleaziest used car salesman in New Jersey. But they are actually quite charming in person. I like to describe them, they're like the moon in that they're not the source of light in the universe, but they reflect it. They reveal that which is valuable in each one of us. And they leverage it and they make things happen. They create productivity and value by identifying what we each have to bring. And it's really magical when they do that. And also, what they suffer under is this idea that the only people who deserve love are the people who can earn their keep, the people who can show you what they have produced. I am what I have done. I am what you say I am. It's really hard for the 3 to disconnect themselves and their sense of value from what they have produced. That's our 3. And our 3 really, they like suffer with imposter syndrome. They do a lot of shape shifting, a lot of who do you want me to be? And another a thing I always like to sort of bring up, because I don't think it gets written enough about, they get this reputation for being kind of shamelessly self-promotional and like, look how fabulous I am. Another point of pain for our 3s, they are naturally impressive and successful and productive, and that can be intimidating to some people. And they will dim their light. They will turn it down for the comfort of someone else because they are still seeking that validation. So they will shrink themselves and again, shapeshift into something that is not true of them to be reassured by the other person that they are still lovable because they're not threatening. And that is a part of the 3's experience as well that I think is really important to highlight, because I think, again, they get this sort of reputation for being really shameless in their presentation of themselves. But sometimes it looks different. And then we have our tortured artists before T Swift got that title. We have our type 4s. So type 4s sometimes are referred to as the tortured artist. Sometimes they're referred to as the romantic or the individualist. But these are our deep sea divers of the Enneagram. They will sit with you in grief. They will sit with you in joy. They will sit with you on a boring Tuesday, and they will help you make meaning of it all. And that's their beautiful gift that they offer. However, their suffering is really at the root of their belief that the world doesn't value that which is boring and ordinary and incomplete. They feel like some piece of them, they had it early on in life, but it was taken away from them, and now they're chasing this missing piece of the puzzle, just constantly kind of trying to find what feels like it will complete them. And they set themselves up for a lot of disappointment by idealizing the thing that they don't have, whether that is a partner who completely sees them, or a job that feels like it fulfills their purpose, or, a city that feels like home. Always the thing they don't have is put on this pedestal. And when they finally get the thing, of course, it can't live up to the measure of the type 4's imagination. And so they're deeply disappointed. And they're kind of driven by, again, what they feel like they lack.
That sounds like a lot of pain.
It is. And the funny thing, they do like to dwell in some melancholy. You don't want to interrupt them in a good cry session. They're into it.
Okay.
They like to sort of be in the land of their emotions. That feels really comfortable for them.
I can see how this is an empathy building experience, learning about the different types.
Yeah.
Because everyone you've described, when you've gotten to their pain point, it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so
right.
hard.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds like a really difficult way to be in life.
And that is the thing. I mean, we could be fighting over pizza toppings, but there's a strand that's connected deep down to my desire not to be controlled, and whatever your type is. It our fights that often aren't actually over something existential have deeper roots in that which does feel much more existential.
Humans are complex, man.
They sure are.
But I'm glad that we have pathways for understanding some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
We're trying. We're trying our best. Ready for the head center, which may be your home center?
Maybe. I'm curious now.
Yes. So the head center types are made up of types 5, 6, and 7. These are our intellectual processors. They have an incredibly generous at their best, and generative, creative brain. So it loves to observe, it loves to scan and take in and deep dive, and then create something new from whatever information or observation they have consumed. They suffer quite a bit around issues of trusting of themselves. Are we getting warmer?
I have my head in my hand.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing at this point. Okay. All right.
Keep going. Cool. Yes. Who and what can I trust? Can I really trust myself? Am I going to be okay to take the next step? And when they really become fearful and really mistrusting, they are looking for something outside of themselves as their sense of reassurance. So our 5s are going to want more information and more research before they make the next step, but they never quite trust that they've done enough research. Our 6s are going to want more backup plans, more safety nets, but they never quite trust that they've prepared enough for what could go wrong. And our 7s are going to want more options. I'm going to want more escape hatches, but I'm worried that I'm not going to pick the right one. So it all sort of comes back to that kind of missing foundation of trust in self. Which one do you feel like is
5?
Okay, great. Well, we're getting into it. So 5s are my favorite type. Disclosure. Okay. On my disclosure slide, type 5, favorite type.
This is why we hit it off so well. I think as you described 8, 9, and 1, those are the people I'm most drawn to in life.
Yeah.
Interestingly.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a correlation.
So all types have some connection, sort of direct line to each other type. But that is down in the rabbit hole tunnels.
Okay.
But it's again, we all have some piece of each other within ourselves. So type 5 is often referred to as the researcher or the observer, the investigator. Type 5s they want to understand how the world ticks. They want to understand how people tick. They have an incredibly curious mind that really does love to do a deep dive. They love to understand things. And they have a real deep sensitivity to them. They don't like you to see it. They prefer to present as much more even-keeled because that feels safer. But there is this real softness that makes them feel like they're always on the edge of overwhelm. Mm-hmm. You're like, keep going.
Feeling very targeted by 5.
I know.
It's fine. I can be brave.
Totally. So the 5 has experienced the world as a place that demands more than it gives and demands more than they have to give. And so they're constantly worried about being depleted, constantly worried about being seen as incompetent or unprepared for a regular old Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah. I feel like that tracks.
So our 5s tend to deal with that by being really self-sufficient. They're sort of a self-contained ecosystem. I'm good. I'll take care of my needs. I'm going to keep a real tight inventory list of my inner resources. And I'm going to be like kind of aloof to the general population so that I don't get overwhelmed by your bullshit because I'm just trying to not be overwhelmed by mine. They can get a little stingy. They can be really secretive in a hilarious way. So like a 5 will be mulling over a major decision for months and months. And then they'll walk into their normal weekly staff meeting and be like, by the way, I'm moving across the country next week. And everyone's like, what?
So does it count if you've dropped hints along the way?
Well, type 5 hints?
Well, like, I think I want to get a PhD someday. Like, to me, that's a really aggressive hint. And then one day I told my husband, I think I'm going to apply for this PhD program, and I did it that night.
Okay.
Like, does that count?
But you had been mulling it over
for like years?
Yes.
About 20 of them?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And how much conversation had you had prior to?
I mean, a couple.
Yeah. That is a very 5 thing to like, again, it's that self-sufficiency. It's I'm going to noodle on this, but it feels a little scary to like let someone into that process.
Well, because what if, and I might not be a 5 and I'm willing to like just be curious around it, but like I think for me it's also I already can't trust myself. So if I let someone else's voice in, then I'm gonna have to figure out if I trust my voice and their voice. And now I've got all these voices, and I'm more confident trusting someone else's voice. So I have to be really careful which voice I talk to.
What a lovely lead into our 6.
Okay.
Which we haven't even talked about wings, but that's a whole nother dynamic. Whereas the 5 sees the world as overwhelming and demanding, the 6 sees the world as dangerous and unable to trust in people, right? Like when people's backs are against the wall, they're not going to stick it out with me. They're not going to stay loyal. They're going to flip, and they're just looking out for themselves. And so the 6, where they struggle is, I don't know exactly what you expressed. I don't know if I can trust myself to know the right people to trust, to be ready for what could go wrong. And so they spend a lot of time preparing for disaster. They are the people who have Advil, Tylenol, Motrin, sunscreen, socks, umbrella, snacks,
Also
Band-Aids.
feeling targeted by 6.
They've got it all in their everyday bag. Like that's not a special go bag. That's the bag they carry with them to the grocery store. They do a lot of projecting too. So I don't trust myself, but I refuse to acknowledge the fact that the call is coming from within the house. I'm not doing that. So it's you I can't trust. It's this world I can't trust. And they do a lot of poking and prodding. Even at their closest relationships, a lot of testing of like, when are you going to betray me? I know the other shoe is going to drop. When are you going to betray me? So they do a lot of that. They're deeply suspicious. They don't care for compliments because what do you want? What are you trying to get by buttering me up? They really struggle with that. Their strategy is I'm going to be ready for anything that could go wrong, and I'm going to be loyal to you so that you will be loyal to me. But they just don't trust that they have trusted the right people.
This is interesting. Like, I think pieces of that resonate with me, but maybe not quite as much as the first one.
the 5.
You said the 5 is the researcher. What's the 6?
The loyal skeptic, the guardian, the devil's advocate. Those are all kind of archetypal names for the 6.
Okay.
And the other thing I'll say, so every once in a while you'll hear people who are familiar with the Enneagram say, oh, I'm a 5-wing 6, or I'm an 8-wing 9. We have wings. So every number stationed next to our dominant type, each number, stationed next to our dominant type is our wing. So for type 6, they have a 7-wing and a 5-wing. For type 5, they have a 4-wing and a 6-wing.
Oh, that's much easier than I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was like you
All
could
over
be a 1-wing 5.
No,
Okay.
you can't be that. No.
Okay.
It is your neighbors. And you have both. You have both wings. One tends to be more dominant than the other. And so the invitation is actually to strengthen the less dominant wing, because those wings provide some balance. If we kind of move around the Enneagram, each neighbor provides some smoothing out of the rough edges of that neighboring type in a really interesting way.
And that's kind of beautiful.
It is. It's really cool.
So then would 9 be, the wings would be 1
Yep.
and 8? Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yes. So there's that may be happening, right? You may, like, your dominant type may be 5 and you have a strong 6-wing, or type 6, strong 5-wing. The other image I'll offer you for like type, the symbol of the Enneagram is a circle with 9 different points around it, each sort of representing one of these, the number. Some people land squarely on the point. Some people are through and through a type 9. Some people land somewhere in that curve between 1 and 9. So that also, just like to throw that in if people are trying to figure out their type, you may be a point type, you may be a curve type.
This is helpful.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some people in my life that I was like, ooh, 8,
Yeah.
9. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that kind of makes it make more sense.
Yeah.
It might be more.
Yeah. It's a lot more fluid, a little more
Yeah.
wiggle room. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So lastly, we have our party people, our type 7. They are often referred to as the epicure or the adventurer. They are people who can nurture and sort of pull out potential. They see possibility in everything. They're excited by possibility in everything. But they have come to experience the world as a very limiting and disappointing place. It's like perfectly fine to waste potential. And that's a real heartbreak for the 7s. Just all this sort of wasted possibility just getting squandered. And so people aren't living up to everything that they could. People aren't contributing the best that they can because the world holds them back, or there is something within them that holds them back, that kind of gets in their way. The way they present is very lighthearted and carefree, and you can't hold me down. I'm kind of a Houdini.
Okay.
Wriggle out of all restrictions, which also makes them pretty unreliable. And so they're a great time at a party. They have the best stories, and they're great salesmen of their ideas. So they love a brainstorm. They love to generate possibilities, and they get everybody excited about those possibilities. And then when everybody is like, we are captain, my captain, we are on board with you, they're like, I'm not following this through. That's your fault for thinking I would. They're sort of on to the next thing because they're trying to avoid pain or disappointment, their own disappointment in themselves if they can't deliver on some incredible vision they've cast. So they just move along.
In your work, how have you seen these revelations help people move themselves forward? Like, have you seen it function as a healing tool? It sounds
Absolutely,
very
yeah.
much like it could be.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, even I can talk about the sort of inches I've taken forwards. 8s are big fighters. We love a fight. We love a scrap. And I love a fight. Like, I love getting into the muck. And that is so not sustainable. Kind of earlier on in my career, I was in chaplaincy. I was in religious and spiritual life.
Me too, twin.
Yeah. And I had a very contentious relationship with it because I grew up outside of Boston in the early aughts, and the clergy sex abuse scandal broke when I was like right in middle school, heading into high school, right as like friends were starting to come out as queer. And I was like, how can this institution protect predators and reject like my friends.
Preach.
Right? But when I got to college, I was introduced to the thorn in the side of the Catholic Church, such as like Oscar Romero and Dorothy Day, people who were staunchly faithful to the Gospels, but were like, this institution is some bullshit, but I'm going to stay in it. As Ron Swanson likes to say, I'm going to bleed the beast from the inside out. I'm going to be in this institution and just be so annoying in pointing it back to the values it professes. And I was like, what a fucking fight for me to get into every day. Hell yeah, sign me up. I was so excited about it. So I launched into this career around ministry and chaplaincy. And again, it was like something that was exciting. And, you know, my first year at Wake, I got in a fight with the priest about like having women during the foot washing ritual at Holy Thursday, excuse me. And it was energizing. And then I hit my 30s and hit the pandemic. And I was like, I have another, like, copy and paste the years I've been on this earth. That's how many years I hope to have a career ahead of me. I can't keep showing up to the octagon. I need to slow down. I need to stop dying on every hill. And it was that knowledge of knowing that I am want to fight that the Enneagram gave me that made me realize that like, actually the thing is to turn down the volume. Actually, the thing is to find something that doesn't like get my pulse racing every single day.
What an interesting conundrum to be in as well. Because like, I guess another question, and I'm going to come back to that self-compassion piece, but I keep having new questions pop up. How do you know how to stay true to yourself while also turning down and turning up? And like, how do you not lose the core of who you are in this? And how do you know like the best of your core to hang on to? Yeah. Like, I'm a very direct person, as it turns out. I'm also autistic. Sure. I'm neurodivergent. I'm ADHD. Just found that out recently. Yeah. And I'm still figuring out like what's me, what's autism, or am I just it? Like, and I'm still learning how to speak about it. But I like how straightforward I am. Yeah. To me, that makes me safe. Yes. But then I'm told I'm disrespectful or difficult or, you know, things like that. And it's like, okay, well, how do I take that and do something meaningful with it while not losing something I really value about myself? Right. So like, have you faced that? Oh, how did you handle that conundrum?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's so again, in a similar example, like 8s tend to like, we like the fact that we're straight shooters. We like the fact that we will say something you don't want to hear. I remember hearing a quote years ago. It's a good like 8-2 quote. Honesty without compassion is brutality. Compassion without honesty is manipulation.
Yes, I've heard. I love that one too.
Yes. And so it's really, it's just what you named early on in the episode. It's this like looking at the thing that we like about ourselves. It's not a static quality. There's a spectrum to it. So where can I find the balance? You love your directness, and I promise you other people do too. I promise they do. I do.
Thank you.
And what is the thing that maybe feels, what's the growing edge? What's the like muscle that you can bring into that exercise of directness that helps temper it and creates a more sustainability around it?
I feel like this is going to lead to a really great conversation with my therapist. I'm sitting here thinking like, I think that what I've been told is to bring more emotion into it. And then that to me feels dishonest.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I think that's where the autism piece kicks in of like, I can't do that. Like, I've gotta shoot straight about this. And so I think that it's like, I don't know. I guess this is another question that's come up for me is like, how does neurodivergence, or do you, if you know, like, how does that overlap with some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think, so again, every piece of how we understand ourselves can be in conversation with our Enneagram type, because it's just another piece of how we understand ourselves. There have been people who have done incredible work around neurodivergence and the Enneagram, and they would be the better experts to talk about it. I think just like with any other piece, we hold both pieces as valid. And again, if you think about like, okay, what is special, and like, what do I love about this part of me? And what do they serve myself and others? Like, how do they serve myself and others? And how do I care for that? How do I, again, sort of bringing in the self-compassion piece, like, how do I be loving towards that in a way that makes them even more generous and more true to what they can offer?
I like the word generous. I think that that's a really accessible word, because I think most of us want to be generous. Like, we want to be good and do good for others.
Yes.
So maybe that's where I'm not a 6 as much, because I do think that most people are really trying.
I think so.
They're doing the best they can.
That is how I open every single one of my Enneagram presentations. I had one yesterday to a nonprofit, and they're sort of like summer staff and interns. And I was like, listen, we're going to talk about some things that you're going to go, ew, I wish that wasn't up on the screen for everybody to see. But I need you to know you were doing your best. And I can't remember the author's name, but the 4 Agreements talks about like, do your best, and your best is a moving target. Our best is different every single day. And depending on how much sleep I had, if I had enough time for coffee this morning, like if I was running late to something, my best is going to look wildly different. And so we are trying our best with what we have. Our best is going to look different. And even if our best doesn't measure up to what we hope it would, it is an opportunity for us to grow, but to also be compassionate to ourselves.
So I mean, that's a great segue into the question I've been kind of trying to get to and getting myself very distracted from. But how do you relate this work back to self-compassion? Because I know that's a really big cornerstone.
Yes.
Yeah, for you.
I think it comes back to that thesis that we are all doing our best. I think you're right. Most people don't wake up in the morning and go, I really want to hurt some people today. I really want to be the reason they have a bad day. Generally not how most people wake up.
Maybe some teenagers.
Sure.
But,
they're figuring themselves out.
Exactly. We'll give
and also
them some grace.
this developmentally, this is not,
We're not
fully.
there yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Middle schoolers are sociopaths, but it's fine. It's generally temporary. But I think that extension of we are doing our best, and what the Enneagram offers us is this specifically is the thing they are trying to protect. This is how a type 6 or a type 9 sees the world. This is the threat in that world that they are trying to avoid, trying to protect themselves from. And they're doing their best in that context. And that helps us to understand why, a 6 is maybe being so combative with a new boss at work when the new boss hasn't even had a chance to prove themselves. But the 6 is already like, well, in my world, you're not going to look out for me when things get hard. And I'm going to lose my whole job, and then I'm going to never be employable. It gives us language for the world that they are perceiving and experiencing, and then how they're trying to respond to it, even if it is not the world that we are operating in or perceiving.
So do you find now that you try to subtly identify what people are and speak to that in them? Or is that our responsibility? Where do you land on that?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
So that's a great question. It's sort of one of the great ethical no-nos of the Enneagram is typing other people. Or this is what I'll say. I think it's fine. In our brain, we try to categorize. We try to understand. And I think if it's an internal thing, while also holding loosely, okay, this is sounding 7-ish, but ultimately I would defer to them on the expertise of themselves. But what would be unethical is for me to be like, Amanda, you're a 7. Right? To tell you what you are, because that's me interfering with your process. Now, if you share with me, Liz, I think I'm a 5, I'm going to trust you on that. Even if you're saying things that sound 7-ish to me, that's still not my journey to interfere with. And I actually think there is I think the exercise of the Enneagram more so than the accuracy is just as valuable. I think developing the muscles of observing ourselves, even if we're still trying to work out the language of type, that's the important thing we're doing.
So it would be ethical if I observe, for instance, in my spouse that I think they're an 8, 9, or 1. And then when we're having conflict, if I just quietly think to myself like, oh my, he's probably feeling a threat to its control, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, and like kind of disaggregate it and be like, all right, this is probably less about me.
Exactly.
In this moment, he's probably searching for a way, like he's maybe scared right now.
Right. Exactly.
And how can I show him that he has agency in this moment?
Bingo.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That is that is ethical, and that is humane and kind. And I mean, it's harder said than done, or harder done than said, but it is a really powerful way to use the Enneagram in conflict.
Okay. So if I am then talking to one of the, I think you call them Care Bear types.
Yes.
Then those are the people that I probably would need to add more emotion to.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And
or even just reassurance that like, I see your value regardless of what you're doing for me in this moment.
Okay. So like adding more words around their value.
Yes.
And how I view them and value them.
Completely.
Okay. And then for the 5, 6, 7 types,
yes.
I feel like I should know this because I'm me and I think I'm one of them, but like, what do we need?
Time to find their center of gravity within themselves. You don't need to trust, well, I would like for you to trust me. Tune into your gut, tune into your wisdom.
I really value that. That's interesting. When people trust me to be an expert on myself, that's like one of the biggest green flags a person can give me.
Yes.
And maybe that's why I gravitate toward 8, 9s and 1s. And I could be totally wrong on this, but I feel like maybe it's that like boundary autonomy piece that they're like
it is
more willing to give me that.
I think well, so maybe not the 1, but yeah.
Okay.
But yes. I think the like they want to be able to determine their own chart in life, and they want you to be able to do that too at their best. And so it makes sense that like that sort of spirit would feel safe to you.
Okay, this is so interesting. And then back to this self-compassion piece.
Yeah.
I think that one of the big things I'm learning from this is that, well, this is a simple way of putting it, but like humans are really complex and this is hard.
Yes. Yep.
And when we like turn this, like look in a mirror, I guess is a better way to say it, and we see these complexities in ourselves, being willing to sit with that, sit with kind of the enormity of it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do a different episode on this, but I had a really powerful EMDR session recently where I was able to give myself compassion in a way I've never experienced. And it was like these memories from my life got wrapped in a bubble. And now they can like bounce around in a bubble instead of like hitting the sharp edges. It was this really powerful experience. So I think being able to do that for ourselves, but then have a little more awareness about the pain other people are experiencing and then like direct some of that compassion.
Exactly. Because it's hard to, it's not impossible, but it is hard to extend that sort of generosity when we can't do it for ourselves. And I'm not one of those people that subscribes to like, you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. It's all an ongoing process. And we all can teach one another about loving ourselves and loving other people. I believe that fully. And I do think we sometimes can be the hardest people for us to love because we don't get a break from ourselves. And so we see every sort of like petty thought that flashes across our brain. We see every moment of impatience or every flash of like irrational rage. So we are not reliable narrators of who we are and how the world experiences us. And therefore we're often very hard on ourselves. So that I think self-compassion is a practice and a muscle. And I think the Enneagram is a powerful, cardio machine that allows us to strengthen our ability to do that.
Yeah, I think that especially for different personality types, I think we like latch on to different tools.
Yes.
Especially that we find the most helpful.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things I like about what you're describing is how extensive it is. I know initially I said like that was kind of a
daunting
piece to me, but I think it's so inclusive this way.
Yeah.
And it gives us such a beautiful way of relating to ourselves and others. And then like viewing areas of growth or areas that need some growth through a less self-combative lens, maybe is a good way to put it.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's scary to confront things in ourselves that we
Terrifying.
don't like.
Terrifying. And scary to confront things in ourselves that we like.
Yeah.
Too. Like, you know, and to have to think like maybe that needs to be moderated somehow too. No, the work of growth is incredibly courageous.
And sometimes it feels lonely.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah. Well, yeah, because there are a lot of people who aren't really interested in that project.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remain as close as perhaps we would like to when they are not doing their work.
And I think, at least for me, I tend to blame myself for that. What does that tell you? I give you permission.
What that tells me is you and I are buds, because like same. I had therapy yesterday, and I was saying, you know, kind of reflecting on a difficult experience recently, and the experience also mirrored another experience that I had with the same folks a couple of years ago, and a couple of years ago, and then just last month, I noticed the same sort of shame coming up, and I was like, I know in my brain it's not my shame to carry, I know. But there is this piece of me that's like, why can't I fix this? Like, I have spent, you know, more than a decade in therapy. I'm doing all this fucking Enneagram work. Like, I wrote a fucking book about it. Like, you know, like, yeah. And yet this like relationship is so fucking dysfunctional and painful. And why? And it feels like there is something I am missing. And maybe there is. Like, the truth is there could be pieces of this dysfunction that I am missing. But also, you know, it does really take two people in relationship to commit themselves to their own work, which then allows them to come back together generously and compassionately. And that's what makes it lonely, is like when one of those people doesn't have the capacity, isn't equipped, or just chooses not to.
And I've had a similar experience, and my therapist said something really helpful where there's like a relationship with a dysfunction and I don't understand. And the words my therapist gave me, I think it was last year, was I evoke something in her I don't understand. Mm-hmm. And that shifts some of the blame off me, that I'm more than like, I'm over here just like blaming. It's right. Like, I'll take all of it. But I think that's maybe a little more generous to everybody too. That
agreed.
You know, like maybe there are times where we're going to have dysfunctional relationships because we evoke something in someone that they can't name. And exactly. They don't know what it is. Exactly. And I think it's a lot more reasonable in like close friendships or romantic partnerships to be like, hey, if we're going to be in this, we got to do the work. Like, this shit is not going to work.
Right.
And it's so much harder in professional relationships or colleagues or, you know, things like that, where there isn't that obligation.
Correct.
To show up.
Right.
With the like intensity and the desire to develop these skills or to work through it in a way where there's hierarchies and power dynamics and all these things. And I mean, I find that so difficult.
It is.
And so complicated. And I often struggle with navigating those things too.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Enneagram can be a wonderful tool in workplaces. And I have witnessed it and experienced it myself. And I think that's a really astute observation that like, but at the end of the day, like, we're all here to increase value for shareholders, right? Like, we're not, that is what we're here for in this capitalist world. Yeah. Like, you know, and so like, we don't maybe have the same responsibility to one another to dig deep and like do the hard work of trying to be my best self for us. And that then comes out sideways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that one of the things I'm learning in a way, like I'm going to go dig into my perhaps type, is how do I hold myself with compassion and grace? How do I hold other people with that while still being who I am?
Right.
And being comfortable with who I am.
Right.
But aware that there's always room.
Right.
To keep going.
There will always be. My therapist says like, we stop growing when we're dead. That's it.
Yeah.
There isn't a destination.
It goes on forever.
Exactly. or at least we have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that feels like the sort of hopeful piece of the Enneagram is like, okay, I didn't do what I, how well I wish I could have done today, but tomorrow's another opportunity. And that actually is, there's this really funny, I'm sure in all spheres of like personal development, but certainly in the Enneagram, there can be this narrative of like, oh, before the Enneagram, I was so disintegrated and but I've grown so much. And I think we want to be defined by the sort of long trajectory of our growth, by how far we've come over years and years and years. And I think that is a scale that we can be measured by. But I think the one that most people experience of us is the much smaller, tiny little, scale that is like an audio needle that bounces much, much more finely day to day, minute to minute. And I think our growth looks much less impressive on that scale, but it is that scale that we have more opportunity to move the needle on the big scale.
Yeah.
If we keep showing up in the little day to day, if we tune in to ourselves moment by moment, just as Gurdjieff said, like if I'm a head center type and I take a minute when I notice myself getting activated, getting fearful, and I go, what does that feel like in my body? What are my emotions that are maybe tied to this bodily sensation? If I can try to balance in, or at least become aware, then I have a different choice available to me than maybe projecting or shutting down.
I think we all are going to have a lot to sit with.
A lot to chew on.
It is. And how wonderful.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
How wonderful that is. Can you tell the listeners how to connect with you, your work, your book, all of the things?
Absolutely. So as I lamented earlier, I did write a book. It's called The Unfiltered Enneagram, A Witty and Wise Guide to Self-Compassion. And it is a very irreverent, silly, jokey, funny guide to the Enneagram. So that is available on all platforms that you can buy books. There's an audio book narrated by me recovering from a cold. So you'll have that. It's at your local library, or you can request it. And then if you're looking for something free, which I implore you to do, I'm on Instagram at Rude-Ass Enneagram. Lots of, again, very silly, very snarky memes about each Enneagram type, but they have a little bit of that depth that kind of punches you in the gut beyond the laughs. So those are both places you can connect with me and my work.
Thank you. I will make sure that those are linked in the episode description as well, so y'all can find Liz easily. As we wrap up today, what is the one thing you want people to walk? If they remember nothing else, what's the one phrase you want lodged in their brains forever, or their hearts, or their bodies, depending on their type?
Yeah. You're doing your best, and this is hard, and you're still doing your best. And that's really something.
Thanks for spending this time with me. Take what you need, leave the rest, and keep moving in the direction of your healing. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who needs it. That's how we all find each other. Subscribe to The Healing Life wherever you listen, and I'll see you in the next episode as the journey continues.